Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albie Amancona, Benjamin Butterworth, Belinda DeLucy and Alex Armstrong. Tonight on the show, for all it's going through at the moment, I actually argue that the United Kingdom is in a stickier situation than Israel.
Left-wingers calling me and other non-white Conservatives coconuts are racist hypocrites.
And I'll be talking about some woke American college students going full circle nuts and batting for bin Laden on TikTok.
And why David Cameron returning to government is a farce and a joke. Suella Braverman was right, wasn't she? Rwanda defeated by the Supreme Court.
It's 7 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome along to the Saturday 5. Now, the Supreme Court has spoken this week, but somehow we're still on air. We've had our reshuffle, though. As well as Albie and Benjamin, we're joined by former MEP and now brilliant broadcaster Belinda DeLucy and the fantastic political commentator Alex Armstrong. Now, you know how we roll around here. Each host gets 60 seconds to outline their argument about a chosen topic, and then we all pile in and it all kicks off. And of course, we want to know your views as well. Get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com, and you can also question us on any topic you like for our Flummox the 5 section at the end of the show. No topics are off limits except math questions, because after our pathetic efforts over the last 2 weeks, I don't want that repeated again. But before we start tearing each other apart, here's your Saturday night news with Tatiana.
Darren, thank you. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Pro-Palestinian protesters staged a day of national action with demonstrations and marches having taken place right across the country. Police say around 250 demonstrators have gathered on Whitehall outside the gates to Downing Street. At least 2 protesters were carried away by police at Waterloo Station after more pro-Palestine demonstrations. People could be heard chanting "ceasefire now" and "from the river to the sea" in the middle of the station's concourse. These scenes were captured in North London this afternoon. Some protesters were seen describing Israel as a terror state. Police say some of the gatherings appear to be a mix of pro-Palestine and Just Stop Oil activists. Well, meanwhile, at least 4 people were arrested during a Just Stop Oil protest earlier today. Activists marched from the Shell headquarters in opposition to the approval of more than 100 new oil and gas projects. The group says peaceful protesters are being locked up, while those who it describes as climate criminals are protected. 2 people have been airlifted to hospital after a dog attack in the north of Wales. Officers were called to an address in the Parheli area yesterday morning. 1 dog has been destroyed. Another 37 dogs and cats were seized by authorities. More on this story as we get it. The Israeli military is warning thousands of people to leave the south of Gaza as it tightens its focus on Hamas terrorists there. Warnings issued weeks ago saw scores of people move from the north of Gaza amid the escalating conflict. Leaflets have been dropped by the IDF near the Khan Yunis area, telling people to move again, this time towards the west. Major advertisers are pulling their business from X, formerly known as Twitter, amid a row over alleged anti-Semitism. It comes after the site's owner, Elon Musk, appeared to endorse a post that falsely claimed members of the Jewish community were stoking hatreds against white people. The White House called it an abhorrent promotion of anti-Semitic and racist hate. Disney, Warner Brothers and US network NBC are among those who have paused their advertising. The Chancellor says there's a pathway to lower taxes ahead of next week's autumn statement, arguing the economy has turned a corner. Jeremy Hunt says this is the moment to focus on growth after inflation halved over the past year. It's understood he's considering cutting rates on inheritance and business taxes in what could be one of the last fiscal announcements before the next election.
OBR numbers and forecasts will be published on Wednesday at the autumn statement. But there is no easy route to reducing the tax burden. The way we do it is by spending taxpayers' money more wisely, and that means having more productive public services.
You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get back to the Saturday 5.
It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes and I can promise that you're in for a very lively 2 hours. Let's crack on with tonight's first debate.
Yes, Darren's got a completely uncontroversial topic to be discussing. It's time for Grime Time.
Now, I want to put it to you straight. The United Kingdom's in a stickier wicket than Israel. Yep, Israel's up against it. What with Hamas, West Bank upheavals and Hezbollah in the north, over 1,400 Israelis, of course, paid the ultimate price in a terrorist massacre. And hostages, who knows where they are by now. But Israel stands firm, like a dog that's got its teeth into something tasty. They're protecting their patch, the world's only Jewish state. It's a show of unity that should make us in good old Blighty a tad envious, if we're being honest with ourselves. Because right now, the UK's version of unity, well, it don't look all that great if you ask me. It's about as real as a £3 note. Our unity is like expecting a group hug at a Newcastle-Sunderland derby. Fat chance of that. We might not have rockets raining down, but our streets are now battlegrounds of ideology. You've got kids bunking off school to wave placards about Palestine. Intifada and jihad being called for on the streets of London. And then there's the circus at Westminster, with Labour MPs getting the jitters over a ceasefire with Hamas and even facing intimidation outside of their offices for not voting for one. Last I checked, Hamas wasn't lobbing rockets over the White Cliffs of Dover. And what about the foreign flags draping over our war memorials? These demonstrators clambering over monuments to wave their banners, spitting in the face of those who secured the very freedom that lets them carry on like ungrateful brats. It's not about the stone, it's about the principles it stands for. The stone, of course, being one thing that one of the protesters shouted at the police. "Why are you defending that stone over children?" she said. Well, as they trampled over said stone underfoot, I want to say, what about those boys that died so that you might be free to do such a thing? Our immigration policy is about as tight as a sieve. Nations are queuing up to bail from the European Convention on Human Rights like it's a sinking ship. We must join them on the border control lifeboats. What we've built in the West is a marvel, but now it's in peril. It's not just the loonies doing the damage, it's our own head in the sand attitude. So I say it's time for a wake-up call, Britain. A strong cuppa ain't gonna fix it this time. Well, Benjamin Butterworth, since that it's the people that you vote for, it's their fault that we're in this mess, so how do you propose we go about it?
I mean, first of all, I've no idea why you think I disagree, because I've not disagreed in any week. But the idea that it's Labour Party responsible is also complete nonsense, because Keir Starmer has explicitly condemned these people. He's condemned this attitude, and it's not his view. He's been steadfast. In fact, I saw a repugnant protest, if you can even call it that, outside his constituency office today, in which they were attacking his wife and kids who are practising Jews. And I think that shows that there is no lows these people will go to. But look, if they want to strategically affect the Labour Party's decision-making, I think criticising his wife and kids, who have, aside from the party conference speech, his wife has never done a public appearance. She's not in public life at all and has no desire to be. That is not a route to affecting Labour Party policy.
I mean, Albie, we've even seen it with the Conservative benches as well, because Suella Braverman, I know you're not her biggest fan. She's
Certainly
not
not.
going to win any awards from you.
No.
But I saw some rhetoric which was basically suggesting that Suella Braverman was only pro-Israel because she's got a Jewish husband. Like, that sort of thing is just grotesque.
It is grotesque, but also, Darren, I think to use the hyperbole of Israel's terrorist attack to compare that to the problems we're facing in the United Kingdom is disgraceful as well.
I don't think it's long before
How
we
can
face
you
the same.
compare the mess that we all agree the United Kingdom is in because of decades of mismanagement from both Labour and Conservative governments to people literally being killed in the thousands in a small country like Israel, people who are still under hostage now? Like, you can't just make these flippant comparisons. I understand you're trying to make a broader point, but some Israelis might find that quite offensive, actually.
Well, they may do, but I had one Israeli...
Will you be OK with insulting Israelis in that way?
But, I mean, Albie, are you really being serious, asking me if I'm all right with offending?
Well, you're the one that just compared the mess in the UK to a terrorist attack in Israel.
By now, that, you think I'm going to get down and cry over offending somebody? If someone finds that offensive, I think it's a really important point that needs to be made. I had one Israeli on the show earlier today, and they were saying that actually what Israel are up against is a warning to places like Britain, because what we're seeing play out on the streets could lead to the kind of horrible scenes that were seen in Israel. And I think that warning is one that needs to be heard loud and clear. But Belinda, do you agree?
I think anti-Semitism and just Jewish hatred has been simmering in this country for years, and the Conservative government have done very little to address it, and now it's bubbling over. Back in 2020, you had the convoy of cars with the Palestinian flags going up and down Jewish streets, shouting that they were going to sexually assault Jewish mothers, Jewish daughters. Nothing happened to those men. Nothing. So what we're seeing is the result of years of complacency, years of soft-touch approach, because, let's be honest, many of us think that our authorities and our government have had a soft-touch approach to radical Islamism in this country and have allowed the hard left to infiltrate our schools and university, sanitising drip anti-Semitism sort of ideologies. I'm a mother, I've got mothers in schools. It is left-wing bias that is almost making it acceptable racism now to blame the Jews for everything. And the Conservatives haven't taken it seriously enough. But it's both the Labour and Conservatives to blame for this greed for cheap labour, unconditional. Wherever you're from, whatever you think, whatever your ideology, come because we want to make money. They should have been more careful. And if hateful ideologies were going to root in this country, they should have stamped it out straight decades ago instead of allowing them to bubble over to the surface, which is what we're seeing now.
Alex, are you optimistic about Britain's future?
I think you know the answer. No, I mean, look, I'm always optimistic about Britain. I believe we can always come back from terrible times like we saw in the wars that we just remembered over the weekend. And to go to the point that you're both making here, because I think there's some valid points on both sides. You know, I'm a free speech absolutist. I do believe people should have free speech, no matter what the cost is. There is a limit to free speech. I think Douglas Murray put this perfectly. He said there is a limit to what a culture should tolerate, what a society should tolerate. That is where free speach should hit the boundary. I think protesting on a weekend
you said you were a free speech absolutist.
Hang on. Yes, fair enough. I'll take that point. I'm a free speech absolutist.
Want to learn the definition of speech.
Maybe I need to learn the definition of absolutist. However, my point really is that there's a time and place to do protesting and to make it impactful. What's happened over the last weekend that just passed, is that there was a protest organised on a significant day of cultural remembrance for this country. Not only that as well, the wars that we remember were a massive slaughtering of Jewish people in the masses. So to do it on a day that's not only touchy for British people, but touchy for Jewish communities is really in bad taste. Now, if you want to win people over to your cause, you first of all have to learn to respect the environment environment, the country and society you're in. And remember that you can only win hearts and minds if you actually try to win them and not just scream and shout at them.
Through intimidation and fear, which is what's happening, yeah.
Well, let me ask a question to each of you then, because we've only got about 30 seconds left of this. Do you think actually we need to reform our immigration system to take this into account?
Yeah, I do, but I also think we need integration policies for the people who arrive here, so they know British values and they take responsibility for integrating, because I do want national unity and I do think it's possible. I'm optimistic as well if the Conservatives get integration right, which they failed on, I think, in many ways.
There's been no national integration policy in this country at all, and I spoke about it on this show a few weeks ago. I think it's a disgrace. The government needs to take a more active role in making sure our communities get on better. It's not good enough at the moment.
Look, there are lots of Muslims who don't act like this and don't think like this, but I think what's been exposed in the last couple of weeks is that there is a very real problem with anti-Semitism among sections of the Muslim community. They're also profoundly homophobic on a scale that no other community has. And I think we fail ourselves as a country when we pretend that those prejudices don't exist because they're more uncomfortable to acknowledge than others.
Alex, I've said time and time again that I think the Jewish community is a shining example of assimilation in this country.
Integration.
Integration and assimilation, both, actually. British Jews have come over to this country, including some of my ancestors, actually, and become Brits. They love this country first. They are British first. That being said, I also have a family member. My stepfather came here from Iran, and he is more than proud to be British. He has integrated in society. He has never once forced me or any of my little brothers who are half Iranian to ever think like an Iranian person. He wants them to be British.
It's less about religion, it's more about political ideology, though.
Correct.
Also, people that left Iran tend to hate Iran.
No, very true. Very good point.
Now, folks, up next, it's Albie, and Albie's going to talk about the unwise use of the term coconuts to describe non-white Conservatives. Off you go, Albie.
To all the left-wingers who describe people like me, Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, Priti Patel and Kwasi Kwarteng as coconuts, Uncle Toms and coons, I have only one thing to say to you. You're a bunch of racist hypocrites. Now, being called things and racial slurs that would suggest that I am white on the inside and black on the outside is nothing new to me. It's something which has been happening to me since I could speak. I'm very used to it. But one thing I cannot stand are performative anti-racists, like the woman who at the pro-Palestine march on Armistice Day last week was pictured holding an openly racist sign calling Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak coconuts because they are pro-Israel. It's an absolute disgrace. What does someone's stance on Israel have to do with their ethnic background? Now, I have had enough of this kind of thing. If we look at how different groups of people behave, why is it that if you are white, you can believe in what you want to believe in, you can behave however you want to behave, but if you're black or Asian, you can only believe in certain things and have certain political points of view? It is absolutely racist to think that manners, politeness and professionalism are only for white people. Black people, like me, can do it too. And as a person of mixed racial heritage, I find it really alarming that whiteness is told as a story to ethnic minorities as something that they must rail against, fight against, that it is an evil that we cannot have in our lives. Now, I find that not just racist, but an insult to my family, who I love dearly. But it doesn't just stop at political activists. It's also perpetuated by elected politicians, elected by you, the great British public. These people perpetuate this nonsense. People like Rupert Huck, who called then-Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng superficially black because he didn't believe in high taxes and socialism. Racism is a cancer that we've got to cut out of society. But in my opinion, there is not enough scrutiny on left-wing racists who call people like me, non-white Conservatives, coconuts, Uncle Toms or coons. And it's time to give them that scrutiny. Benjamin Butterworth, I'm going to come to you because you are token lefty on the panel this week. It is alarming, I think, the level of racism that I get from people on the left who think it's acceptable to call me a coconut or a coon or an Uncle Tom on Twitter. Is there any defence for what they're doing?
No.
So why do they do it?
Well, I'm slightly offended that you think I'm going to defend racism. Look, I've never known a left-wing person, a Labour person that's in my social circle that's ever said something like that. But clearly there are pretty nasty people on the internet that do say things like that.
But why is it something which is so prolific, do you think, Alex Armstrong? You know, Labour MPs like Rupa Hutt saying this openly at an event at Labour Party conference that Kwasi Kwarteng is superficially black.
Yeah,
There's a problem, isn't there?
It's completely nuts. And it's being perpetuated by the left, the so-called Be Kind left, who are being very, very selective about what racial slurs are acceptable and which ones aren't. I mean, it's just profound. I mean, you've seen it online. We've been engaging on this as well, Albie, that people use the term coconut, for example, and then attribute it to white supremacy. So rather than taking it for what it actually means on face value, which you've just spoken about, they're trying to twist it and say it's only actually offensive in the terms when it's used against white supremacists. Absolutely nuts.
Just to say, if anyone was offended by the use of language and the topic being discussed, we do apologise and realise that actually it is a very sensitive discussion. But what I would say is, Albie, is that I don't think that you're white inside, but I think you're posh inside. And is that what they're trying to say? That they just assume that all white people are Jacob Rees-Mogg or something?
You see...
Is that what they're getting at?
I don't know what they're getting at. And look, I do have a posh voice. I will. Obviously, that is evident to everyone in the studio and everyone watching at home as well. But I don't come from a posh background. I grew up in a cancer house. So I don't think we can just make assumptions about people's background based on how they speak or based on their skin colour. And that is the point that I'm making. So I think it's just wrong to assume things based on characteristics that we can't change, Belinda. But why do you think it is that on the left, there seems to be this idea of what a black person or an Asian person should be, but on the right, we don't have that, and yet we're the racists?
I know, it's almost like the right don't see colour, and colour is everything to the left. They define everyone by their colour, their race, their sex, anything but their character. It's against Martin Luther King. It's literally everything opposite to what he said when you said you can't fight hatred with hate, only love. And the hysteria from the left over microaggressions.
Like, you would be told that for saying things like maybe you don't believe in third-wave feminism.
Yeah.
You would be told you're not an ally of women, right? You're not a real woman or something like that. I get told I'm not a real gay. I'm not sure what that
if you don't adhere to a prison of ideology, you're somehow not properly black.
That question to Albie, do you think actually it's identity politics, it's seeing things through the prism of identity, or is it isolated to race? What is it?
It's not isolated to race. There is certainly this idea that if you are from a minority background, you've got to have left-wing opinions. Otherwise, you're some sort of traitor. You get it on Twitter, self-hating gay man. I get it on Twitter, being the vice chair of the LGBT Conservatives and the founder of Conservatives Against Racism, that I'm apparently some racist homophobe. I don't think there's anyone really that's done much more in the Conservative Party to fight against homophobia and racism in recent years than I have. So I find that charge quite interesting. But, Benjamin, where do we go from here? How is it that we get the left and the right singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to issues like racism, so we're not getting at each other, calling each other these horrible racial slurs?
I mean, look, in real life, I've never heard someone talk like that.
You've heard Rupa Hutt talk about it. You must have seen that footage.
I've seen what Rupa Hutt said, but I don't think she was referring to taxes necessarily. I think she was saying that his background doesn't reflect the one which most black people have grown up in, which is the point that Darren was getting at, that his socio-economic experience of life, I think he went to Eton, if I'm not mistaken, is very different to the vast majority of black people. So does he understand their experience of life? Well, no, he probably doesn't, in much the same way that Jacob Rees-Mogg doesn't understand. I think that's the point they're getting at, and that's quite reasonable.
I think that's excusing a slur for political gain. I mean, I think one of the things that we were just talking about a minute ago, Albie, is like it seems to be only the right that are called out for being racist when they use a slur or something similar to a slur. But when the left use it, they sort of own it and they go, well, actually, that's not a slur.
And let's be very clear. Look, there has been some horrendous racism on the right in the past. We don't have the best record on race relations in the 20th century, and it's important to say that. But things have hugely improved. And I think the same scrutiny that the left put on right-wingers in the 20th century needs to be put on the left in the 21st century.
Okie doke. Right, once again, apologies for the strong language used at the start of the last discussion. We need to use the terms used, but many apologies if any offence was given. Now, still to come tonight, Benjamin's going to tell us what he thinks of David Cameron's return to the Cabinet. And do you know what? I'm probably going to agree with every word. And Alex will assess the Supreme Court's verdict of the government's Rwanda plan. But coming up next, youngsters in America have been on TikTok this week expressing their support for that lovable rogue, Osama bin Laden. No, I ain't making it up. Belinda DeLucy will deliver her verdict. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to a very lively Saturday 5. As always, cheers very much for your emails about tonight's topics. Gillian has written in and she says, Darren, you are so right. Gillian, your 5 is in the post. I am terrified for my grandchildren's future, yet every fine day brings more people to our shores. We are under threat. John says, this is not a laughingstock. This is a national security risk. There was disrespect for Armistice Day in this country and kids are being taken out of school. And Stephen says, I agree with everything Albie has said tonight about the coconut term. Well said. Now, it's time for our next debate. Up next, it's Belinda. Belinda, what have you got for us tonight?
Well, Osama bin Laden is trending on TikTok. And no, not because the woke students in America who have been batting for Hamas recently have seen the error of their ways. Nor because they want to educate themselves on this Islamist death cult and the suffering around the world it causes. No, sadly, it's the opposite. Bin Laden has been trending because mostly college-age women are circulating Bin Laden's letter to America that justifies his 9/11 attacks and agreeing with him, with young women saying he had a point, that his letter was well written and everything he said was valid. TikTok generations are going mad. These women wouldn't last a day in Bin Laden's world, locked up without a chaperone, denied an education and treated like cattle. But apparently, as long as radical Islamists hate the West, they are happy to get into bed with them, and TikTok seemed happy to circulate this Islamist anti-Jewish manifesto long enough to get millions of views. TikTok is brainwashing our children, spreading deeply harmful and contested ideologies to millions of easily manipulated young minds. The latest fashion is hating Israel, and wow, has Generation TikTok embraced that. Why else do we see teens tearing down photos of kidnapped children and marching side by side with these radicals on protests, thinking they are righteous? From whipping up pro-Hamas sentiment to self-harm, eating disorders, encouraging the young to believe they're born in the wrong body, this highly addictive, life-sucking platform is creating a hostile climate for the well-being of our children and should be banned. Now, I will ask Alex, you free speech absolutionist. Do you think...
Not so much, apparently. Not so much. Benjamin's corrected me, so I stand corrected.
Not so much. Do you think TikTok should be banned?
No, I don't. And listen, while you've made some fantastic points, Belinda, and many that I don't disagree with, what I will say is this. Young people are very easily led by very simple messages. And it's very easy for the pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas people to say, Israel is slaughtering millions of children. They're under, you know, this horrible regime where they're suppressed, etc., etc. And it's much harder for the state of Israel to argue that back. Now, should we ban something because a small radical group of very vocal people are putting out insufferable ideology online? Absolutely not. What needs to happen is the vocal majority of people who find this absolutely disgraceful need to use these platforms more often and actually get their voice out there. Because once we do that, we'll start having this counter to this terrible tyranny of the minority. So I really don't think we should ban something for the sake of appeasing those people, because they'll find the next platform. And then what do? Ban Twitter? Ban Facebook?
No, but we could ban smartphones for under 18.
Oh, for goodness sake, Albie.
I actually think that Belinda doesn't go far enough. I honestly feel that the biggest threat to our children at the moment are smartphones. And I find it absolutely shocking if I go out for dinner and I see a family around a table at dinner and they're all on their phones. I just think, what is it like at home? You see parents and children walking down the road, the mum's on her smartphone or the dad's on their smartphone, the children are on their smartphones, not interacting, and we see the impact that it's having on children's mental health, and it's having a particular impact on the health of young women.
Albie, that's really wishful, but it will send our country back to the dark ages.
No, it won't. The dark ages of children playing outside and having a childhood.
No, Belinda, you're absolutely right. But we will lose any competitive advantage. If you start teaching children at 18 how to use a smartphone, we will be completely eradicated from the world stage. China is teaching their kids, and they have a much better policy on this. They feed their social media platform with educational things. So there's a much better way to do this.
Hang on. You're just making the case for Belinda to ban TikTok.
No, but it's not banned in China.
No, because you're saying that the Chinese are gaming this app.
They absolutely are.
That they created to...
But they have their own app. They have it's not the same app. It's not the same app. They use the social media platforms to actually...
So let's ban the poisonous app that they've created to poison the West.
Well, why don't we just fill it and put legislation in it with content that's actually going to educate young children? Well, what's more... Well, listen, what's more pie in the sky? Banning smartphones for everyone under 18 or actually transforming social media to make it an acceptable place for young people?
What is less pie in the sky would be to just ban TikTok.
I think
listen.
Yeah, so Benjamin, what do you think?
Only this week, Nepal banned TikTok. Yes. So clearly it's possible for a government to do that. Look, I think in reality, it's not something that's going to happen, and I would be very reluctant to be in a country that is so fearful of the modern world that it starts banning things like TikTok, like Twitter, like Instagram. If you really went down that route, I don't know where you would stop.
Well, we ban synthetic drugs. We ban progression in other areas that are harmful to our children. It's literally harming the mental well-being of our children. I've got 4 teenagers teenagers. It's addictive. The dopamine that you get, the kicks off the TikTok, it specially manipulates the mind. This is not a harmless platform when you can have free speech and it's all lovely, just get more balanced ideas out there. It's a drug, and our children are addicted, and they will rule over us one day, and we'll regret letting them have all this social media and smartphones.
There are 32 million views of me on TikTok, and none of them on an account I own.
And none of them very nice about him.
No,
either,
none of them very
frankly.
nice. But look, the reason I don't have an account is because when I looked at it once or twice, I was horrified by how addictive it was. It was on another scale. But, you know, yesterday I was speaking at the University of Exeter, so everyone there, I suspect, was born this millennium, right, if they're a university student. And I have to say, the idea that they all loved Bin Laden or bought into any TikTok craze was not true at all. I was really amazed by how bright and the diversity of thought. And so I wouldn't be so cynical about the younger generation.
Right, OK, still ahead, folks. Alex Armstrong has plenty to say about where this week's Supreme Court ruling leaves the government's Rwanda plan. But next, after years of talk and nonsense ended with his complete rejection by the public, we thought we'd heard the last of him, but I'm afraid he's back in public life to plague us once more. It's Benjamin Butler. He'll be talking about David Cameron. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Oh, welcome back to the Saturday 5. Now, the emails are flying in. Christian has written in, and Christian says, incredibly important monologue from Albie. Society, in general, has a blind spot in not condemning racism against those with perfectly acceptable views. It's not OK, and I thank Albie for bringing attention to it. Very well said. Now it's time for our next debate, though. Up next, it's Benjamin. And what's been riling you up this week, Benjamin?
Well, this week the news was full of stories about the return of gonorrhea. Now, you'd think that was about the worst comeback possible. But no, David Cameron is back too. Yes, that's right. The Tories are going through leaders so fast that they've had to go back to the beginning. Rishi Sunak has appointed David Cameron as Foreign Secretary. Now, I think that'll amaze a lot of people. Suella Braverman didn't seem too happy about it, and maybe the reason he went for this has-been was just to distract from the row that she's seen. But what are David Cameron's foreign policy credentials? Well, this is a bloke whose last decision in office as Prime Minister was to instigate the Brexit referendum. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that was the biggest foreign policy failure that any Prime Minister has committed in modern times. And then, when he didn't get the result he wanted, he famously whistled off into the doors of Downing Street and disappeared into the abyss. Well, now we have Lord Cameron of Greensill. Yes, he's back. And his other decision was on China. Now, he went as Prime Minister, cosied up to the Eastern nation, and even arranged a state visit for Xi Jinping. When the Queen had a banquet for the Chinese dictator, yes, I agree with Biden, he's a dictator, there's one man that refused to attend that's also now in power. Yeah, King Charles III made a rather controversial decision to not turn up to the state banquet. I think history is remembering the King Charles rather better than David Cameron. But also, imagine being a Tory MP right now. There's, what, 350 odd of them? And Rishi Sunak thinks they're so bad that not one of them is capable of being the Foreign Secretary. That's a pretty bad sign about the state of Tory MPs. So maybe in a way I agree with Rishi Sunak. None of them are good enough to hold the great offices of state. So why don't we fling the whole lot of them out? Now, Albie, you'll defend anything the Tories do. Do you defend this?
Yes, I think it's brilliant that David, indeed, I should say, not David, Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton in the county of Oxfordshire is back in frontline
He has a Labour
politics.
council, I think, now as well.
Well, that is not the point. This is a man who had incredibly good relationships on the international stage, whether or not it was with European leaders, whether or not it was with American leaders, or whether or not it was with Chinese leaders who we now look down upon. But the idea that he can actually have these broad relationships with people across the world is an absolutely good thing.
Yeah,
and
when they lie in his pocket.
and he is going to bring a sense of professionalism and a sense of statesmanship to that role as we enter the last year before a general election. Thank God he's back.
If he finds out these meetings don't come with the £1 million a year fee that he was getting for cosy meetings with China in the last couple of years. Belinda, you approach this from the right. I know you're quite concerned about countries like China. Do you think that this is a mistake, that what he's done previously in office might affect his decision-making at the moment?
Oh, I just despair for the Conservative Party if they think David Cameron's the solution. I'm not sure what question they've been asking because, the country's greatest centrist dad makes a comeback for what? All he's going to be doing is swanning around the international stage going, oh, Brexit deplorables, I'm so sorry about Brexit.
What's this thing about him being a centrist?
Absolutely right.
Look, under Cameron, taxes went down. He reduced the size of the state. Immigration was lower than it is now. Every post-Brexit Prime Minister has been less Conservative than David Cameron.
You know full well that the types like David Cameron want the international stage applause far more than they care for the national applause. They're swanning about with Macron and Biden. The G7, Davos, that is the boy band that is going on with Hunt, Rishi and Cameron at the moment. I'm sorry, but I like him. He's a sweet man. I met him on a train once when I had my 4 kids, and he came over and he said, oh, your kids are so well behaved. And I had bags of sugar under the table going, yeah, such a good mum. He was very, very sweet. So it's not that he isn't a sweet man, but I think the Conservatives are destined for absolute oblivion.
Of course, these days it would be TikTok. There's
Darren, your sort of political rise to fame or infamy was in a kind of countercultural movement from that Cameron-Blair consensus, wasn't it, in that Brexit movement. Do you have to thank him for the fact that Brexit happened?
Oh, well, I do actually, yes, I guess so. But it was only because his feet were held to the fire and he was so bloody arrogant that he didn't think we plebs would dare vote against his wishes. It's the elitist contempt that I can't stand with David Cameron and those politicians like him. I just think that this is the worst comeback since they did that remake of Dallas, to be quite honest. And, well, less glamorous. Because Ultimately, I don't even think that pig that he allegedly went with back in the day will be voting for the Conservative Party come the general election with him.
that.
So there we are.
He was really good, though, because he was one of
With
the
the
only
pig?
politicians... Not with the pig, I haven't watched it. But he was one
There's
of the
not a video,
only...
don't...
No.
My God.
It's on TikTok.
He ignored a Strasbourg ruling over the prisoner votes. He stood up to the EU over that, and we got all this pressure. Strasbourg ruled we had to give our prisoners the votes. He said, no way, Jose. I just want to defend him on one thing, and if he can show that kind of, you know, spine over ECHR, then maybe, I mean, I'm being hopeful.
Do you doubt, though, that he's not going to be looking at this through the prism of, well, the Conservatives are going to be out of power in a year's time, so let's line up all my business interests.
That's exactly what I think he's doing.
I worry about that.
Can I just
really
say,
do.
you know, we talk about David Cameron's track record on foreign policy. This is the guy that said, rather than Brexit, I'm going to go and negotiate a much better deal for Britain, and came back with absolutely sod all, frankly. So I don't know what his track record
This
is.
is the man who brought the Conservatives back to power after 13
but
years.
We're talking about his experience as a foreign secretary to Albie. Name me one foreign secretary.
Disrespectful.
Name me one successful foreign policy that David Cameron pushed through whilst he was in power. Give me one.
David Cameron...
There's not one, is there, Albie? No, you can't tell me. You can't.
With leaders on the international stage.
Rubbish.
He organised one of the best G7 meetings of states that we have ever seen in history. It was widely believed at the time. David Cameron, it's a good thing that he's back, and thank God that
I'd just very quickly say that as a Labour voter, given that the Tories fell to 19% after the appointment, maybe I'm cheering it all the way to number 11 or whatever it is.
We'll have a meeting about it. It's very hard to do. Now, still ahead tonight, don't forget to get your questions in for Flummox the Five. That's the segment at the end of the show where we answer your questions on life, the universe, and Benjamin's choice of studio attire. But next, he actually looks quite nice today. But next, the Supreme Court has spoken. So where does that leave the government's Rwanda plan? Alex Armstrong has a few thoughts. You're with the Saturday Five live on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. We haven't killed each other yet. As always, cheers very much for your emails about tonight's topics. I've got a Richard 1 and a Richard 2. So this is Richard 1. Richard says, TikTok is no worse than any American social media platform. It's an interesting point. Richard 2 says, better to go with a has-been than a no-hoper in flip-flop, wishy-washy Starmer. Oh. Now, Danny says, everyone on this despicable panel has displayed sympathy with Israel and not one word for the innocent Palestinians. They're not all Hamas. Well, that's us told. And Barry says, how dare Cameron want to raise foreign aid? How dare he? Have you seen the state of our country? Yeah, that's a good point. Right, folks, now it's time for our next debate. Up next, it's time to hear from Alex Armstrong. So, Alex, away you go.
Thanks, Darren. Well, Suella was right, wasn't she? Rwanda has been thwarted, as we all knew it would. What's been really striking about this is I'm sure Albie and some other panel members tonight will tell me how many lawyers there are as MPs in Parliament and how much money they spend on lawyers when they're looking at legislation. Was it because they wanted Rwanda plan to fail? Do they want to use the ECHR as a little toy to dangle at the electorate in the next election? Well, I think so. Now, what's really, really interesting about this, the government and Rishi Sunak has come out and said he's going to introduce emergency powers. All of a sudden, Rishi Sunak's managed to find some emergency powers he can introduce. Why wasn't he doing this a year ago, I wonder? Maybe it's because we don't want to reduce immigration in this country, as Suella has rightfully said. And now we know, once that emergency legislation comes through, that the ECHR is going to shove its boot on Britain's neck and try to stop any flight from leaving this country. There will be lawyers gluing themselves to that runway for a few bob, I can guarantee you that. But there are some simple solutions. In fact, I think even the Dominic Cummings even came out and said this, and I really don't like that man very much, but he actually made a very good point. Why can't the government just say that anyone who comes here by boat will never get legal status? Why can't we invest in some technology to see when these boats are arriving so we can tow them back to France? It's because I think our leaders don't intend to change the situation, and I guarantee you not a single flight will leave to Rwanda before the next election, and the Tories are going to use this as their big next Brexit campaign and dangle another carrot in front of the British public. So I firmly believe, we should withdraw from the ECHR right now, avoid the international humiliation, finally take our sovereignty, as we were promised time and time again by Brexit, into our own hands, introduce our own Bill of British Human Rights, which will enshrine so many of the similar laws that European Union will favour, and get it done. Let's actually get Brexit done, get out of the ECHR and be sovereign again. Now, Albie, the token Tory on the panel, what do you think about leaving the ECHR, and was Suella right?
I'm relaxed about leaving the ECHR. I actually thought the British Bill of Rights, that I think it was Dominic Raab, that was his idea. Right. I thought that was a perfectly reasonable idea. The idea that we'd leave the ECHR and not replace it is a nonsense. Of course, we would replace most of those rights that are in the ECHR and make them more appropriate to Britain. But I can't stand Suella Braverman, so no, she's not right about anything.
How can you say she's not right when she has literally been proven right this week?
And she's playing a character, because in her maiden speech in 2015, she spoke about tolerance and fellowship towards immigrants and hoped that our union with the EU would remain a happy marriage, and she promised to serve with humility, integrity and warmth. Now, Darren, I know in 2016 you were a Lib Dem and then 5 minutes later you decided you were a Brexiteer, but you were young. Suella Braverman, however, was an MP, that was her maiden speech, and she's done a complete 360.
Well, Darren, let me ask you this. As someone, you know, who's famous for helping us get Brexit done, do you think we should leave the ECHR?
Oh, God, Absolutely. I think we should scrap the Refugee Convention. It's a 1951 convention that was built for the post-war age, and now 700 million people are technically able and permissible to come to this country under that convention. It's insane.
I don't think it's going to happen as David Cameron as Foreign Secretary, though, is it?
No,
Let's face it.
George Osborne actually said that, which, of course, he was Chancellor under David Cameron, and he has said, under David Cameron as Foreign Secretary, we will not be doing any of this.
Yeah.
So that just is another reason why David Cameron is a wrong-un. And actually, I think it was David Cameron that suggested a British Bill of Rights originally, you know. I think Theresa May toyed with it. And it just goes to show that he can take more positions than, well, the Kama Sutra.
Belinda, you were MEP, obviously.
Yeah.
What will be the response in the European Parliament to this if we did leave the ECHR?
Oh my gosh, I think it'll be very interesting because I will expect the horror that, my gosh, this is ruining peace in Europe in our time. But actually, the mood across Europe, especially in countries like Italy, Denmark, Austria, even Germany, are now looking to the UK and going, we need to do something. The UK is onto something. And actually, as it's moving right across Europe in politics, the UK is suddenly moving all liberal again. We're going against the tide. I think the best way is that the EU, Europe comes together and they just suspend parts of the ECHR. There's no way we'll ever leave it. That's a dead duck. And do not believe the Tories if they say they're going to. They're just going to try and con us into voting for them again. They will suspend parts of it so that we can all use a Rwanda-style type of processing.
But wouldn't that be better than leaving it altogether, reforming it so it actually works for modern Europe?
Well, no, if I could choose to leave it, I would absolutely leave it because it is totally outdated. It's also a totally different monster to when it was first thought up. It's hugely overreaching.
Well, Benjamin, you know, I don't know if you describe yourself as a Starmerite. I don't know whether that's correct.
A cheerleader.
OK, right. How do you think Labour will respond? Let's say the Tories manage to get out of the ECHR by the next election, or use it as an election dangling tool. How do you think Keir's going to respond?
Well, I mean, polling says that people have more faith in Labour to solve this problem than the Tories, because the Tories haven't done anything. You know, Suella Braverman is the Kim Kardashian of Parliament. She is obsessed with media attention, but never does anything. And I think the truth is that she said she'd stop the boats. She didn't. She said she'd leave the ECHR. She didn't. She said she'd stop the hate marches, as she called it. She didn't. She said she'd tackle anti-Semitism. There was no suggestion of a change in laws. She said she'd cut the hotel bills. She didn't. I mean, I don't understand why right-wingers like Darren are hoodwinked by this woman who does nothing. I call her Slow Sue because she's slow to get anything done.
Is it not the point, though, that Suella wasn't given the tools to stop the boats? I mean, there was no intention for Rishi Sunak to say, right, let's start towing the boats back.
No, I don't think that's true. I think there's plenty of tools in the Tory party.
And she did actually propose the change after the hate marches, which she called out, and she has been the only politician to call this out consistently.
But you know what? She tries to blame everyone else, and actually, I think it's quite the revelation of a politician. You know, politics is an art of diplomacy. Your inability to persuade anybody to go on that journey with you and to convince your colleagues is your failure.
And also your colleagues who agree with you on Rwanda, who agree with you on Brexit, who agree with you on getting immigration down. She lacks the political acumen and skill to get through her programme, and I think, unfortunately, she was over-promoted. She should never have become the Home Secretary, and that's why I say it's a good thing, actually, that David Cameron is back, because it's someone who actually knows what they're doing.
David Cameron really delivered for us. He got Brexit done. Thanks for that. But isn't the point here that, yes, you can bash Suella however long you want to, but she is right. There is no appetite in the high elite level of the Tories, which, you know, are now being surrounded by Rishi Sunak, as he's put all with Jeremy Hunt, Grant Shapps, David Cameron, all the boring old Tories, the liberal class Tories. There is no appetite for them to cut immigration because of GDP figures.
There's no political will at all in the Tory party to reduce immigration, and we need to get used to that.
Agreed, Linda.
Loads more still to come tonight. We'll be hearing from the one and only Emma Webb on the policing of protests, and the one and only Ben Leo, who'll be reporting live from Australia. What could he be doing over there? I wonder. It's made a few headlines. And make sure you keep your questions coming in for Flummox the 5. But next, is Elon Musk anti-Semitic? Has the Crown gone too far? And is 30 quid too much for fish and chips? Just some of the topics we'll be covering in Bunch of 5. You're watching the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albie Corner, Belinda DeLucy, Alex Armstrong and Benjamin Butterworth. Loads more to come tonight, including the Bunch of 5, where we take the week's biggest topics and give you our verdict. This week we're asking, is it time for tax cuts? Is Elon Musk a racist? And would you pay 30 quid for a dodgy-looking fish and chips? And, well, that's just 9 chips, actually. It's 8 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Nine chips, daylight robbery, talk about a cost of living crisis. Also still to come in this hour, the brilliant Emma Webb will join to discuss the policing of protests, or lack thereof. And Ben Leo enjoyed himself so much on the show last week, he jumped on a plane to Australia. So he'll be here to tell us how things are shaping up ahead of Nigel Farage's appearance on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. And of course, don't forget Flummox the 5. You can ask us anything, and we'll, as long as it's not a maths question, please, and we will answer at the end of the show. Hit us with your best shot. We're ready and waiting. But before all that, it's your Saturday night news with Tatiana.
Darren, thank you very much, and good evening. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Pro-Palestinian protesters staged a day of national action with demonstrations and marches taking place right across the country. Police say around 250 demonstrators gathered on Whitehall outside the gates to Downing Street. At least 2 protesters were carried away by police at Waterloo Station after more pro-Palestine demonstrations. People could be heard chanting ceasefire now and from the river to the sea in the middle of the station's concourse. Well, these scenes were captured in North London this afternoon. Some protesters were seen describing Israel as a terror state. Police say some of the gatherings appear to be a mix of pro-Palestine and Just Stop Oil activists. Meanwhile, at least 4 people were arrested during a Just Stop Oil protest earlier today. Activists marched from the Shell headquarters in opposition to the approval of more than 100 oil and gas projects. The group says peaceful protesters are being locked up, while those who it describes as climate criminals are protected. The Israeli military is warning thousands of people to leave the south of Gaza as it tightens its focus on Hamas terrorists there. Warnings issued weeks ago saw scores of people move from the north of Gaza amid the escalating conflict. Leaflets have been dropped by the IDF near the Khan Yunis area, telling people to move again, this time towards the west. Major advertisers are pulling their business from X, formerly known as Twitter, amid a row over alleged anti-Semitism. It comes after the site's owner, Elon Musk, appeared to endorse a post that falsely claimed members of the Jewish community were stoking hatred against white people. The White House called it an abhorrent promotion of anti-Semitic and racist hate. Disney, Warner Brothers and US network NBC are among those who've paused their advertising. The Chancellor says there's a pathway to lower taxes ahead of next week's autumn statement, arguing the economy has turned a corner. Jeremy Hunt says this is the moment to focus on growth after inflation halved over the past year. It's understood he's considering cutting rates on inheritance and business taxes in what could be one of the last fiscal announcements before the next election.
OBR numbers and forecasts will be published on Wednesday at the autumn statement. But there is no easy route to reducing the tax burden. The way we do it is by spending taxpayers' money more wisely, and that means having more productive public services.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now let's return to the Saturday 5.
It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday 5. Another great hour coming up, including all the latest from Australia ahead of the I'm a Celebrity launch tomorrow. Will our GB News colleague Nigel Farage be crowned King of the Jungle and not just our hearts? Now it's time for Bunch of 5, where we spin through 5 of the week's big stories and give our always well-considered and thoughtful opinions. It's a big week ahead in politics with Chancellor Jeremy Hunt all set to deliver the autumn statement, and Hunt has hinted that he may be unveiling tax cuts after telling the Telegraph that the economy has turned the corner. Is it time for tax cuts, and could such a plan save the Tories? Albie, you're rich enough already. Do you really need more tax cuts?
Well, I think the taxes we're hearing about being cut are things like inheritance tax, and I can tell you my parents do not have anything for me to inherit that would be impacted by inheritance tax. But I think it's an interesting tax that the government is allegedly looking at cutting. But I would say perhaps from a political perspective, as a populist policy, a lot more people think they will pay inheritance tax than actually will. So if the government actually say, well, we're going to abolish inheritance tax, it costs a couple of £1 billion, obviously a lot of money, it sounds to the average voter like a lot more than saying we're going to take 1p off income tax or a couple of p off corporation tax.
Do you know what? I think actually it's a sign of the direction that the Conservative Party are heading in, because I think actually they chose Surrey over Sunderland in appointing David Cameron as Foreign Secretary, and now they're choosing Surrey over Sunderland in choosing inheritance tax over personal taxation. That's my view. But
I think that's actually a very adept point. You know, they're trying to save the blue wall because they've decided or realised that the red wall, those seats like the ones you're from, are no hopers for them keeping them. So maybe it makes some sense. But look, only about 4% of estates pay inheritance tax. Most people don't realise quite how rich you have to be in order to be affected by that.
Benjamin, as a policy, though, this was when George Osborne and David Cameron proposed abolishing inheritance tax back in the late 2000s. It's what scared the Labour Prime Minister at the time, Gordon Brown, from holding an election after he became the Labour leader.
Yeah, it's pure politics, because they're desperate. And there's no chance that things like income tax are going to be cut, because Jeremy Hunt has said, and I agree with him, that the main thing that matters is inflation. Now, if you cut taxes, that will have an inflationary effect. Margaret Thatcher said that, let alone Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt. And if inflation goes up, well, then you've still got less money in your pocket and the state has less income.
And I think that goes to the point about, you know, Jeremy Hunt saying the economy's turned a corner. I really don't believe we have. And I think there's a lot more a lot further we need to go on inflation in order to get the economy under control. And obviously that's not just microeconomics, that's macroeconomics as well. There's a bigger thing at play here with inflation. But for Jeremy Hunt to start celebrating we've turned a corner when I think we will probably be in a recession by this point next year, is very, very rich. It's very, very rich for Jeremy Hunt.
A few weeks ago, you were talking about how good the UK economy was doing compared to the rest of Europe.
Well, it is. It's still doing better
story.
than the rest of Europe. I'm not saying it's a success story, growing 0%.
You literally made that argument the last time you were on the show, that we were doing so well in this country economically.
I was talking in comparison, Albie, not talking about Britain and its individual state.
Oh, please.
But as a country, inflation is still far too high. It is. And I think what people really care about money in their back pockets. And as Darren has rightfully said, they are not going to give you that money in their back pocket. They're trying to pretend that they are, and they're trying to win over some of the blue wall because they're going to lose it.
Well, money in the back pocket sounds like dodgy money.
Well,
can I just quickly say
that than nothing at all, frankly.
We're projected to have 0% growth for the entirety of next year. So if he's saying we've turned a corner, I mean, you know, God help us what his expectations were before that.
We haven't turned the corner, Belinda, have we? He's just gone smack straight into the wall. And it's looked desperate times, desperate measures.
I think the Conservatives are a little bit delusional as well, because I'm looking at the party thinking, because of your mismanagement of our money, especially over COVID and lockdown and the abuse of the furlough scheme and the track and trace and the hugely bloated civil service and public sector we have, all the silly positions of diversity in this, that hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayer, the Conservatives have overseen all of that waste of money, so they think we're going to be grateful to them for them giving us a small tax cut. No, it's our money. It should have been.
It's also relatively hilarious that, you know, they get rid of Liz Truss for trying to promote a high growth economy, and then they're trying to go back to that same argument now as a vote winner.
And remember, for you to get anything good out of this Tory government, your nan has to die. So it's not a great election slogan.
Now, may she go on and on and on. Thursday saw the release of the first half of the final season of The Crown, which delves into the last weeks of Princess Diana's life. However, the show's creators have come under a fair amount of heat, I think it's safe to say, for their depiction of the events and what critics argue has been, well, taken one or two creative liberties. Benjamin, are you a fan of The Crown? I don't actually know. No.
Do you know what? I've never watched it because I feel like I know what happens, so...
Don't give me any spoilers, please.
You know, exactly.
You don't, actually, because they take so many liberties that, you know, when Queen comes out with...
I did read a spoiler that they kill off a main character in this season. But do you know what? I have watched little clips, but I've never watched a proper episode. I do understand why there have been suggestions from previous culture secretaries to say that Netflix must make clear this is a fictional interpretation of events, because lots of people, especially that aren't British, are going to think that some of the made-up stuff is real.
Belinda?
I loved it. I've watched it back-to-back, the Diana series that's just been released last night, crying through most of it. I thought it was absolutely beautifully done. The only bit I'd sort of take umbrage with is the ghost, the returning ghost of Diana. I thought that spoiled it a bit because it was a bit ridiculous. But I thought it really exposed a possible side to the story as well, with Dodi Al-Fayed's character being quite a dicey one in that, I thought, and he had got a lot of sympathy over the years, and maybe it wasn't as clear.
Well, you see, I still felt sorry for Dodi because of the fact that he had such a torrid relationship with his father.
Yes, the father did not come across well at all in it, and really played with the relationship. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. Maybe they took artistic licence with it.
See, now we're all falling
we don't know, but
isn't it fair? Because they sort of treat the royal family in the same way when it comes to Diana and Charles's relationship. They're doing the same with the Al-Fayed family and Diana as well.
They're harsh on the Queen as well.
I think Diana obviously comes off extremely well in the TV show, and
she's dead.
She comes off. Do you know what I mean, Darren? You know, I mean, look, I think Diana's story is something that touches many people in Britain, and I think people still really, really love Diana. And I think to do anything to tarnish her, they would be doing their own show a disservice, because I don't think they want to lose their audience.
Actually, though, she wasn't portrayed as a saint. I thought they did it very well. They showed this side of her that was attracted to drama and attracted to the press, and not like this, you know, perfect saint-like character.
I've always loved The Crown, maybe similar to you, Belinda. I think it's a really great British export.
Yeah,
this is one of the highest grossing series on Netflix. It breaks all sorts of records when it comes out. Yes, it takes artistic licence. It's a piece of art. That's how we should look at it. It's not a documentary. So it really irritates me when people get all puritanical about The Crown, because it's a drama.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've actually done a relatively good job of creating a balance in the show.
Yeah.
And, you know, even that last moment... Oh, I don't want to... Actually, I'm not going to do any spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched it. Sorry, guys.
And look,
you know, it's a good show.
Let's be honest, it's more true to life than the Harry and Meghan documentary.
Well, and I do think it makes England look really beautiful.
So do
it does.
But right, next, Apple and Disney are among the big firms to have suspended advertising on social media platform X, formerly Twitter, in the wake of an alleged anti-Semitism controversy. The site's owner, Elon Musk, appeared to endorse a post that falsely claimed members of the Jewish community were stoking hatred against white people. Musk denies the post was anti-Semitic. According to US media reports, Apple, Disney, Comcast and Warner Brothers Discovery have all ceased advertising on X. Alex, I think you know more about this story than the rest of us. I haven't, to be honest, really been able to keep up with it because it's been going on overnight, really.
Yeah.
And I got up at 5 a.m. this morning. You know. Please feel sorry for me, viewers at home.
He's watching The Crown, don't feel sorry.
Do you actually think... Has this put you off Musk?
No, not at all. I mean, look, at the end of the day, there are controversial opinions on every social media platform. We've been speaking about TikTok today as a perfect example from that. And, you know, if advertisers really want to pull their ads from anything that's controversial, there will never be any advertisement because there's always something controversial online. The point that I think is very, very clear about this, Elon Musk has a very, very broad range of views. He's even put out a tweet today that said he believes that calling for Gaza, from the river to the sea, Israel will be free, sorry, Palestine will be free, I beg your pardon, is an anti-Semitic genocidal thing to say. And so you know, he clearly does have some balanced opinions. But if you're going to remove your advertisement on one person's tweet, what are they really trying to do? Maybe they're trying to take Musk down.
So you think there's an agenda at play here?
Absolutely. And it was clear when he first took over the platform, when they all removed their ads, they were just waiting for a moment to do it.
Benjamin, this is woke capitalism trying to take down Elon Musk.
Well, I mean, chance to be a fine thing. The bloke's worth about 200 billion quid some days. You know, I think when you talk about zero tolerance to anti-Semitism at a time when anti-Semitism has never been more potent and more contagious, this is what that looks like. This isn't a controversial topic for which you could debate the rights and wrongs. It was a racist smear, basically. And I think that if ever there was a justification for a company to do this, it was a time like this, because he should know that you can't stoke hatred at the expense of a racial minority at a time when they're facing that in real life.
But why are we holding Elon Musk more accountable than we hold other people accountable online? No, I think it's just that there's a clear bias towards people that are successful and obviously someone who runs a platform, and the others that are not. I mean, we just discussed today potential racial slurs and some people finding that acceptable.
Well, that's what I was about to bring up, actually. I mean, there's so much racism on Twitter. I'm sure that all of the clips that will be clipped of me tonight will have some sort of racist comment on it. So are we saying that advertisers should pull out of Twitter because of all of that?
Well, I think you should be banned from using it if you say something that's clearly racist. I don't know why that would be a high bar to have. The problem is that this guy owns Twitter, and therefore he can't be banned from the thing he owns, but maybe some people that have influence over it can exercise that.
Well, I'm grateful that the adverts have stopped, because those Disney adverts on that platform were just hitting me again and again with their new woke film. I'm quite glad they're not going to appear anymore. I rate Elon Musk. I think he's really improved the platform. However, I do agree with Benjamin. I think the tweet he did...
It was stupid.
It was stupid. It was clearly, to me anyway, very anti-Jewish. And if he apologised, then perhaps that could go some way. But I do think it's also a personal attack, because YouTube and TikTok, as we've just mentioned, TikTok hosting all that pro-Islamist terrorist stuff, who's going to pull out from TikTok? No one.
But as Alex says, clamping down on the genocidal chant, I think is actually a really robust measure that, as far as I'm aware, I haven't heard any other social media platform come out right and say, we're going to do that.
And in fact, you'll find a Disney advertisement against somebody who is chanting that exact same phrase on TikTok. So if we're talking about where does the bias lie, why is the focus on Elon Musk? Is it because that they don't like what he has to say or the power that he has, perhaps?
Right. This is an utterly bizarre story, but here we are. A study suggests that the number of people in Bradford's Pakistani community who have married a cousin has decreased over the last decade. The change has been put down to higher educational attainment changes in immigration rules and new family roles. The BBC was absolutely, utterly jubilant about this fact and touted it as, you know, oh, look at this good news story. I thought, it ain't good news that over 40% of people are still marrying their cousins.
Well, I'm sorry, Darren, that is a vicious attack on our late monarch.
Very, very, very distant. That's not the same.
It was almost 100 years ago as well.
First cousins. And a lot of people bring up this argument, actually. I've had it online. People say, oh, well, you know, it was very common in the aristocratic communities and the royal communities 100 years ago. And it's like, right, but there are a lot of things that happened 100 years ago that aren't normal now. But it is still normal now in some communities, especially in the British Pakistani community, for cousin marriage to go on. It is still legal in the United Kingdom because people are worried. In fact, I watched a documentary about it. How governments have been worried that they're going to be seen as racist if they implement this kind of law. And look, at the end of the day, cousin marriage has got health risks. A lot of the children who are born as a result of cousin marriage have really quite serious genetic health conditions, and it is absolutely right that the state bans this practice.
I am so shocked it's still legal in this country that I didn't realise that. I think, and you say the cousins of the aristocracy and royal family, there were only a handful of families that did it, and you saw the haemophiliacs come through the generations and young
Habsburg
royals.
Jewel.
Yeah, really sad. And to choose that risk for your child, I think isn't something to be encouraged either. It's not very dutiful to your child.
No. It's deeply disturbing that this practice actually... when I read the headline, I was shocked that it actually is still something that communities, no matter what race or religion or ethnic minority you are, endorse. I mean, it's deeply un-British, first of all, to do this. I mean, I know we're talking about the royal family, but to marry your cousin. But, you know, it's deeply, deeply un-British, and it's deeply against our values in society to endorse this. How can we...
But it is improving. It is improving.
Oh, well,
it's a good news story.
I would say that, you know, they cite that educational standards going up as being one of the things that they've learned the way out of this. I think this is probably one of the things that happens when these groups aren't integrated. So the parents that are probably pressuring their adult kids into doing these decisions, when those kids may well be aware that that's not normal, could only do that if they're cut off from other parts of society. You know, when they integrate more widely, when they speak the language, when they have regular jobs outside of that community, I think you're far less likely to see parents pressuring their children into these decisions.
And of course, we do look forward to the Channel 4 reality television studio in which Benjamin marries his cousin.
Married at first relation.
Last and far from least, Kerridge's Fish and Chips it's a restaurant in Harrods, served what was described as a bland and ordinary serving of fish and chips, priced at a whopping 37 quid. Tom Kerridge is under scrutiny for the high cost of his dish, which is on screen right now, and it was served with a total of just 9 chips. Now, Benjamin, you've had some fancy meals in your time. Would you be happy with that?
Do you know, I actually did buy fish and chips at Harrods in Qatar Airport, and without any lie, it's the best fish and chips I've had in my whole life. So if the one in London's proper Harrods is the same as that, I'd be tempted to splash 37 quid.
And of course, you didn't use any oil to get there. Albie?
No, I wouldn't spend £37 on a fish and chips. And actually, I get fish and chips almost every week, actually. I love a good fish and chips on a Friday. And I already think the fish and chips, my local fish and chips, is really expensive. It's about 17 quid nowadays to get a fish and chips in some parts of London. So to think that you can buy it for almost 40 quid in Harrods, well, it's nice money if you can get it.
No, I mean, it's bonkers, isn't it? I mean, the best fish and chips you can get is something that's under 10 quid. Greasy, dirty.
Where?
I mean, you find them outside of London, let's be honest. You're not going to find a fish and chips for less than 10 quid.
Even outside London, we have a thing called inflation.
listen, the local chippy down where my mum lives is 12 quid, I think, with a drink. So it's doable. It's doable.
And the whole point of
the drink's £2.50,
is all
Albie.
about how gnarly and filthy and fishy the oil is for me. I don't want anything clean and pristine and done with a little machine. I just want gnarly, 10-day-old oil and then smell it.
Wrap it in a
it's
bit of
greasy and
newspaper.
oh, that's fish and chips
I must
for
just
me.
be really tight because I would look at that and say 9 chips. I haven't had a dry.
Yeah. They're chunky chips, though, aren't they?
Yeah, they are very. If we can get the image back up, they are clearly quite chunky chips, but. As I say, there they are there. Yeah. 9 of them, and they do look like they've just come out of a packet. Like you've got their frozen chips that you've just whacked in the oven.
They look dry as a flip-flop. There's no way that's
What's hilarious is they've put it in a little cup to make it look like
it's like an egg cup. It's almost like an egg cup, but they put.
How can we sell 9 chips? Put them in a cup. That'll be nice.
Who is buying this stuff, Benjamin? You're a high-flying man that likes fine dining. You said you'd buy this product because if it tasted so good as it did in Qatar.
As long as it was Qatari.
Yeah. I mean, I'll add that the Harrods at this airport was not 37 quid. I'm not sure how much it was because it was in a different currency. So maybe I don't have a clue what I paid. But do you know what? Great food can cost money. And actually, should we really have a problem with a business that can generate that money, create jobs? You know, that's a good thing. And if 37 quid means there's a few extra people who are working in the kitchen or cleaning the floors, then that's not a bad thing.
Spoken like a true Blairite.
That's very true, isn't it?
Now, still to come tonight, your chance to flummox the 5. And Ben Leo joins us from Australia as the clock ticks down to Nigel Farage's debut on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Let's take a quick look at what he's been getting up to. Right, look at that. There's Nigel. That's Josie next to him. And there he is. He's got his hands up in the air. He's ready for it.
It's like he's about to unify Australia and Britain, isn't it?
And he's having a good rummage.
This is weird, isn't it?
Well, it is, Rod. The ITV have just released these, and that's him doing a trial, so we get to see him do a trial. But next, we will be looking at the recent spate of protests and asking if the police are enforcing the law. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. As always, cheers very much for your emails about tonight's topics. Stephen has written in, he says, David Cameron supported gay marriage. I liked him for that, but I disagreed with him on Brexit. Leslie says, Darren, Britain's only hope of survival is for the majority of Britain to wake up and vote Reform UK.
Yeah.
The only truly patriotic party with Britain's best interests at heart. And Peter says, if Starmer wins, will he clear the backlog of asylum applicants by offering an amnesty to all illegal migrants already here? Well, someone needs to do Benjamin's cleaning, I guess. Now, currently, London is immersed in the second weekend of protests. Last week, demonstrators marched in solidarity with Palestine on Armistice Day. Shame. And this weekend, the focus shifts to the Just Stop Oil movement, advocating for climate change awareness. Criticism has been directed at the police for the handling of these protests. The pressing question remains, what's the solution? Well, joining us is the UK director of the Common Sense Society, Emma Webb. Emma, what is the answer here? Because I'm going spare. Our emails are everyone saying, look, what the hell is going on in my country?
The police just need to enforce the law and stop being disingenuous with the public. I think it's pretty straightforward. We've actually seen this weekend that the British Transport Police, I'm being specific here, the British Transport Police, so as not to give the Met any credit by proxy, have actually been enforcing the law in Waterloo Station. They've actually done a bit more than they have done in previous weeks, which just goes to show that the police do have the powers to deal with these sorts of things. And we've seen Mark Rowley, the Met Commissioner, being very straightforward. You know, I'm not a lawyer, but there are many lawyers and MPs who have been very, very clear about this, that when they say, oh, we don't have the powers to prevent them from climbing all over the monument in Hyde Park, that is just simply untrue. There are all sorts of offences that they could have used to prevent them from doing that, but they chose not to. And I think one of the reasons why is because it's the sheer numbers of people involved in the protest. I think they're afraid of having a London riot style situation igniting, and so what we've seen them doing is using everything in the book to target those people who are actually the potential victims of these protests, so people like the Campaign for Anti-Semitism, instead of focusing on those who are the ones who are the potential aggressors. So Suella was absolutely right. It's two-tier policing. So the solution is not to create more laws, but to simply enforce the ones that we already have.
And Emma, I wonder, to what extent do you agree that to a large extent, the police are just scared, right? The police feel fearful that they'll be accused, dare I say, of that R-word racism?
Absolutely, I think that's the problem. And this is an issue with the police leadership. If you're a frontline police officer, this situation is actually putting you at risk. And it's putting us at risk of increasing disorder in our streets. We've seen this with other protests as well, with two-tier policing around Black Lives Matter and Extinction Rebellion. When you don't enforce the law properly, these things escalate. They escalate to criminal damage. And that is clearly the case with war memorials. There is specific legislation to protect war memorials if the police think that there is a reasonable chance that those war memorials will get damaged, including the poppy wreaths surrounding them. So actually, this is putting the British public, and particularly the Jewish community in London, at risk of escalating violence. And so they might think in the short term that it's worth just not enforcing our laws in order to try and create some kind of peace. But actually, the police have a duty to enforce the law. And what they're doing, actually, as we saw when they were tearing down those posters that had been put up for about Israeli hostages, or targeting the Metropolitan Police, targeting the Campaign for Anti-Semitism when they asked them twice to turn off their billboards and leave the area because they were being, possibly at risk of being interfered with by the pro-Palestine protesters, what we're seeing here very clearly is the police siding with the bullies instead of siding with victims or those who are potentially victims. It's an unsustainable situation. It's completely unacceptable. And what's worse is the police are being totally disingenuous in their communications with the public. So, for example, just very briefly, when they said about the war memorial that we saw this weekend on Wednesday being scaled by those protesters, they said that they said that there wasn't anything that they could do about it in any case, and then they said that their officers weren't able to get there in time. When we saw that the brilliant reporting from the Twitter page Inc. Monocle, I urge anybody to go and have a look at that. We saw clearly from the video there that the police were standing right there just before these protesters scaled that monument. So it's simply untrue.
And Emma, to what extent do you think that today's sit-in, or whatever it is they call it, in Waterloo Station today, where the police have made arrests, to what extent do you think actually these protesters have felt emboldened by the inaction of the police, that they just now have concluded that they can simply get away with it?
Of course, it's common sense. These things are going to escalate if you don't enforce the law, because people will think that they can get away with doing whatever they want, whether it's criminal damage or whether in the end, ultimately, it's violence, or maybe it's carrying placards of swastikas on our streets. So I think they have been emboldened. What we've seen this weekend is that it is possible to enforce the law, but the police only seem to be willing to do that when the protests are at a smaller scale rather than these absolutely enormous masses. And the message that sends is that if you can get a large enough group of people together, you can create lawlessness on our streets, you can make London a no-go zone, and the police will do absolutely nothing to stop you.
Well, just finally, Emma, I wonder to what extent we can rely even on the justice system at large, right? Because Extinction Rebellion, they caused £500,000 worth of damage on HSBC's London office, right? They were smashing the glass up, and none of them have faced any repercussions for that, right? To what extent is actually the police making an arrest and then them going through the legal system? Well, that doesn't even then lead to repercussions.
Yeah, we're in a lot of trouble, I think. Because firstly, the police don't seem to know the law. The police commissioner seems to be misrepresenting the law and is having to be corrected by MPs and lawyers on Twitter. And we also have a situation, it's not the only example. Black Lives Matter vandals also, Extinction Rebellion activists haven't faced justice for all sorts of criminal damage that they've created in the process of their protests. So I think that the message this is sending overall is one that it almost incentivizes escalating disorder and potentially violence. And I think that this is a really, really critical moment. The police need to do their jobs. It's really not complicated. And I think police officers need to know the law. They need to understand the law properly. And the police commissioner needs to communicate with the public in a way that is professional and clear. And frankly, the Metropolitan Police's communications with the public have been wildly unprofessional.
Right. Thank you very much, Emma. Sound as a pound. The UK director of the Common Sense Society there, Emma Webb. Right, quick reactions if we can. Benjamin, I mean, have you got any faith in British policing?
Some, but what I was going to say was that, I don't sympathise with these protests, but I do with Just Stop Oil. And I'd just suggest that the idea that promotion at any expense, which is what these kind of potentially illegal activities are because they get loads of attention. Does it really work? Because public opinion and government policy on oil has gone in the opposite direction to Just Stop Oil. Mass protests like this one haven't affected government policy. When I was a student, you had big protests on university tuition fees and austerity, didn't affect government policy. I'm quite cynical that this is an effective way to get your voice heard and to change policy.
So as a supporter of Just Stop Oil, how are things going with the Qatari division?
I didn't say that. I said I sympathise with the cause, and I would question whether these protests actually achieve the cause. I don't think that's really... I think ever since the Iraq War March of 1 million people in, 2003, I think every subsequent protest has basically been ineffective.
All right, we're going to have to leave that there, but we've got more coming up, because coming up next, the moment millions of you have all been waiting for. He's a dyed-in-the-wool right-winger who sometimes rubs people up the wrong way, but would argue his heart is in the right place. Now in Australia, the spotlight is about to shine even more brightly on him as he takes a massive step into the unknown. Yep, we're about to step down under to speak with our very own Ben Leo. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5, as always. Cheers very much for your emails. Trev has written in, he says, "Hi peeps, just had fish and chips for tea. Cost $4.50 here in North Manchester. Fried
What did I say?
Nice fresh cooking oil, not the dirty stuff that we..." Norrie from Fife says, £10 at the Anstruther Fish Bar, the home of fish and chips.
You lot aren't in touch anymore. You see, you've been too London bubbled.
Yeah.
See, I knew it. You can get ever cheaper than
I must be going to the wrong bloody fish and chip shop.
Yeah, the Harrods branch in Newcastle.
Qatari branch.
Yeah.
Claire says, "When I was young, we respected the police and the job they did, but now they've lost that respect through their wokeism." Absolutely. Right. Now, GB News presenter Nigel Farage has made his way down under for the 2023 season of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which launches tomorrow. Farage sees this opportunity as a chance to captivate a new audience. But will he be crowned King of the Jungle in 2023? Well, Ben Leo was here with us this time last week, and it seems he likes the company of poisonous creatures because he's now turned up in Australia. Good evening, Ben. What's it like?
G'day, Darren. How's it going?
Very good, very good. So what's the latest then?
So look, bombshell pictures just released a few minutes ago of Nigel Farage's first trial. He'll be leading the opener tomorrow night on ITV. it's fair to say ITV are getting their money's worth out of Nigel, a rumoured £1.5 million fee, and they broke all the rules in the book. For the first time ever in the series, they flew him 2,000 miles out into Australia's Northern Territory, which is the outback, scorching 40-degree heat, for what appears to be, by these new pictures that have just dropped, for a gunk and slime challenge. One particular picture of Nigel looking absolutely revolted. He could have walked into a bar of Remainers for all we know. Another one with his head peered right into a VW Beetle. He did it with ITV's Josie Gibson, YouTube star Nella Rose, and it's fair to say that, as I said, tomorrow night, the big show opener, Nigel is going to be the huge star of the show.
So, Ben, why were those three picked in particular? Is it because they're the biggest names?
Well, look, I think, like I said, ITV want to get their money's worth out of Nigel for his fee. I think there's been a lot of speculation about whether Nigel's going to put viewers off. But in my book, I mean, according to the bookies, Josie Gibson from ITV is the clear favourite at 2-1 to win the series. Nigel's not far behind as third and fourth favourites. So, yeah, they're the biggest names. Nella Rose as well, maybe not quite a familiar name with a lot of the older viewers, but my 12-year-old niece, for example, texted me yesterday, absolutely buzzing that Nella was on the show. So I think as far as she's concerned, she's going to be tapping into a lot of the younger audience. As far as the other celebs are concerned, half of them did the traditional walk the plank stunt, which was on the Gold Coast here where I am. They walked off a diving board on the edge of one of the tallest buildings in the Gold Coast, and the rest of them, including Nigel's, well, what we hope will be his arch enemy in the show, staunch Remainer Fred Sirieix, the match relay from TV's First Dates. He parachuted into the Gold Coast. So, yeah, it's teeing up to be a spicy series. And as I said, Nigel, the big star of the show. One good thing that we have confirmed for Nigel, I said to him before he went in the jungle, I said, Nigel, I'm concerned about your smoking. What are you going to do? And it has been confirmed that ITV for this series, they've allowed him to go off camera for a fag whenever he wants one, and producers are armed with scores and potentially even hundreds of packets of his favourite cigarettes. So he will be able to smoke after all those strenuous tasks and challenges.
What about drink, though, Ben?
Yeah, he's not going to be able to drink. And he did say before he went in that he had been training himself for no booze and even no coffee and no caffeine. And actually, he said it was the caffeine that was the worst thing. By the way, he also said he wasn't going to smoke, but then he was perhaps landing at Brisbane Airport with a cigarette coming out of his mouth. So, yeah, he didn't quite stick to that one. Maybe he'd had word that he was able to have a puff courtesy of the producers. In terms of the series coming up, we've got evictions coming a week Sunday. So from now until next week, there'll be trial after trial. And you've got to say, Nigel will probably be doing most of them.
And Ben, if he's in for the full duration, he gets to the final, how long will that be?
So the final is on December the 10th, which is that's 2 or 3 weeks from today, if my maths is right. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, the bookies think he's going to make it. Josie Gibson's up there. Sam Thompson from Made in Chelsea is another one. And the one I'm looking really forward to is his third co-favourite, Fred Sirieix, who, if you looked at his Twitter from years ago, he's a French citizen living in Britain. Swathes of tweets laying into Nigel Farage, calling him a coward, money-obsessed, loves the sound of his own voice. So I think producers of the show are really hoping that perhaps Nigel and Fred lock horns and clash in quite epic fashion as the weeks roll along.
Well, we shall see, Ben. We're going to chronicle it all, of course, from you. I mean, Ben, what will you be actually doing from there? As every night, are you going to be chronicling what he's been up to, giving us a blow-by-blow account?
Yeah, so I'm going to be GB News man on the ground here in Australia on the sunny Gold Coast. I'll be doing live hits from breakfast through to the afternoon, through to prime time, and hopefully back with you guys again next week on the Saturday 5. So if you tune in to breakfast tomorrow morning, we should have some more information about Nigel's trial. But all eyes at the moment are on tomorrow night's big launch. We've waited weeks for this. The papers have talked about it for so long. Nigel was umming and ahhing for so long. Now these fresh pictures have dropped. I don't know if we can see those again. That one of Nigel looking revolting has had me in stitches all morning. But now those pictures have dropped. It's here. It's kind of like Christmas. You've waited so long for it, and finally it's here. So it should be an epic couple of weeks.
Right, yeah, and then, so, I mean, if we think about series in the past, this is reportedly, and obviously we're not privy to this information, but it's reportedly a record fee. Why do you think it is that they've been hounding Nigel for years, trying to get him on? What is it about Nigel Farage that's so appealing to them?
Well, he's like Marmite, isn't he? I mean, people like you and me who supported Brexit, we love him because he single-handedly, for more than 2 decades, worked on that single life mission. And you can't argue that whether you support Brexit or not, Nigel has principles. He had one mission, he stuck by it for decades, and he pretty much single-handedly delivered it. For the Remainers, or the Ramonas, as I like to call them, a lot of people don't like me using that phrase, but come on, they are Ramonas. They hate what he's done with Brexit and forcing the UK out of the European Union. One key thing as well, I forgot to mention, Nigel, a couple of days ago, finally had a chance to learn of David Cameron's appointment as Foreign Secretary to government, and Rishi bringing him back a last gasp attempt to save the crumbling Tory empire. As you'd expect, Nigel laid into it, called it an absolute disgrace, and just said, look, this is the last roll of the dice for a really pathetic outfit that is government. And also, very crucially, he did give the biggest hint yet that after the jungle, regardless of how well he does, he is open for a big return to politics. So some exciting news on that front as well.
Absolutely right. Ben Leo, hang fire, because we're going to go to a break, but we want more from you live in Australia. You're with the Saturday 5 folks, live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new
It's your new t-shirt. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. Let's go straight back over to Australia. We've got our very own Ben Leo positioned out there, ready for Nige to get stuck in. Ben, I want to talk about that image, if we can get that back up, where Nigel is looking absolutely, well, disgusted, I think is the word. These exclusive images that have just been released from ITV, where he's actually doing his first trial. And the shot that I'm talking about isn't this one. He looks very happy there. He looks less happy in this one, where he's got his entire body stuck in this gunge or whatever it is. There, that one there. Ben, tell us what's going on as you understand it in this image. We got Ben Leo?
So ITV, what they do is every week they'll throw little bits of red meat to tease the upcoming trial. So what they've told us from these images, I mean, these are explosive images. These are the first time we've seen Nigel in action after weeks and weeks of speculation of his participation in the show. But what we understand from ITV is that they were taken 2,000 miles into the Australian Northern Territory, the outback, scorching 40-degree heat, and they were involved in some sort of slime, animal guts and dunk challenge where they had to really get involved in, getting in the mix and getting soaked and submersed in this horrible gunk. And that one picture that has had me in stitches all morning of Nigel, as I said a few minutes ago, it's as if he stepped into a bar full of Remainers. He looks revolted. That picture is, I think, the personification of Nigel realising what the hell he's got himself in for. Maybe the £1.5 million rumoured fee will kind of soften the blow, but yeah, I think judging by that, we're going to have a hilarious couple of weeks with Nigel doing a lot of these challenges and really putting himself out of his comfort zone, which, to be fair to him, he said he wanted to do. He said he wanted to show another side of himself to up to 10 million viewers of I'm a Celebrity, who he feels are an untapped part of the electorate. And in his pre-Jungle interview a couple of days ago with The Sun, he gave his biggest hint yet that this could be his big return to politics. So if he gets stuck into these challenges, eats all the nasty animal organs and gets dunked in slime and whatever else, he could potentially win over vast swathes of the electorate that may have not given him a chance before.
And Ben, if it's really that traumatic, you know, well, 1.5 million, that'll get you some canny therapy if it's that traumatic. But, you know, I actually do think that there's a point to be made here about reaching a new, younger audience, because guess what, Ben, as you chronicle on this show and others, they're simply not hearing conservative-minded ideas, are they?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's fair to be... I have sympathy for the younger generation these days because not a lot is going well for them. They can't get on the housing ladder. They're priced out of housing. Inflation's absolutely crippled them. They've had a Tory government which has pretty much let them down for the past 13 years. And it feels like the world's against them. And they look at their mums and dads and the boomers ahead of them who have had all these amazing opportunities with the housing market, with jobs, with the economy. And it kind of feels like, you know, what's going for them now. So if Nigel can tap into that part of the electorate, the disillusioned youth, the kind of 18 to 35-year-olds who will tune into I'm a Celebrity, then he's got a massive opportunity to really do himself some good if he does choose to get back into politics, which is what he has hinted at.
All right, Ben, we can all look forward to you giving us the daily scoop every day. So cheers very much, mate, for coming in tonight and taking us through those images. And cheers as well to our guests tonight, the brilliant Belinda DeLucy and Alex Armstrong. Now, next up, folks, thank you to you two as well.
Who are you?
Next up, it's the brilliant Mark Dolan. Cheers very much for watching. We'll see you again next week. But here's your latest weather from Craig.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to Sunday, for most of us we will see further rain. There'll be a few brighter moments and for all it will be fairly mild. Reason for the unsettled weather is this huge area low pressure which is not going to go far as we go through the second half of the weekend. Note the tightly packed isobars down towards the south indicating it's going to be pretty blustery. So as we end Saturday, going into the early hours of Sunday, relatively clear skies across England and Wales initially. Further north we have further areas of rain and they will sink their way southeastwards as we go through the course of the night. It's a mild one for all of us, temperatures staying firmly in the positive territory, and as I mentioned, it's going to be pretty blustery down towards the southwest, risk of some gales here as we go through Sunday. Sunday really is a mixture of showers or longer spells of rain. Some of the rain could potentially be fairly heavy at times. Best of any brightness probably up across eastern Scotland. Southwestern England may well cheer up too as we go into the afternoon, but for most it is a mild one. Temperatures may be a shade cooler than they have been today. On to Monday, further rain is in the forecast for much of the UK. Maybe something a little bit drier and brighter coming through for parts of eastern England, and here actually winds may well be a little bit lighter. Further west, it's going to be another blustery day. Good news is Tuesday and Wednesday it does turn a little bit dry for some of us, but feeling a little bit colder.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer,